Hi guys, this is just a quick video on the topic of the composition scheme. So I made a video earlier regarding the applicability of the composition scheme where I answered the question of the people where you guys are asking me the question that whether a person who is supplying both taxable as well as the exempted supply can opt for the composition scheme, and I replied that one of the conditions to opt for the composition scheme is that you should not engage in any supply of goods which are not leviable to tax, and not leviable to tax is different from the exempted supply. So not leviable to tax is like the liquor or petrol, diesel, etc. So if you are supplying any goods which is not leviable to tax like the liquor, then you cannot opt for the composition scheme. So if you are supplying the taxable as well as the exempted goods, then you can opt for this scheme. So if you are supplying both taxable as well as nil rated or exempted goods, then you can opt for the composition scheme. And one more question which we have dealt in that video, which is on the applicability on the composition scheme, and the question is like whether that person who are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme also need to pay tax on the exempted supply. Let's check out what we have discussed on that video. But one more question. In section 10 subsection 1 it is written the person who want to opt for the scheme have to pay tax at the rate of 0.5%, 1% or 2.5%, or effective way 1%, 2% or 5% of the turnover in a state. Turnover in a state. So what is the meaning of turnover in a state? So turnover in a state is defined under section 2 subsection 112, and turnover in a states include the exempted supplies. Turnover in a state include the exempted supply. So it means that you have to add up also the exempted supply for calculating the turnover in a state. So it means that you have to pay tax under composition scheme also in case of exempted supply. So your goods are nil rated and you have to pay tax under the composition scheme also for those nil rated or exempted supplies. This can be happen because the turnover in a states also include the exempted goods. So it means that you have to pay tax under the composition scheme of goods which are exempted under GST, which is nil rated or wholly exempted under GST. So is this can be happen? Is this the true intention of the meaning of the aggregate turnover in a state? So according to the definition, the turnover in a state also include the exempted supply. So therefore those goods which are nil rated has to be paid tax by those person who want to avail benefit of composition scheme. So I think this is a clerical mistake. I think this is a drafting mistake which the government will come up with certain kind of modification, amendment, or by way of a notification. This can be happen that this kind of a mistake will be rectified in the future. And also there is no need. I think you should not pay tax in case the goods are exempted or nil rated. So as you can see that I said that you don't need to pay tax on the exempted supply because that supply is exempted. So in my view at that time I said that you don't need to pay tax as per the legal or as per the logical explanation. So I said in that video. But recently the government also launched, or you can say the government organized a video on the GST which is called the GST ki masterclass. So they had the 3 video on the 3 different topics. So the first class of that masterclass is like the registration, and the second one is the invoicing and something like that, and the third one is the composition scheme and the accounts. So similar question was asked by some person, and he asked that whether a person who is supplying both taxable as well as exempted supply need to also pay tax on the exempted supply. And the revenue secretary answer this.
शर्मा जी सर, एक लॉजिकल सवाल ये आपसे जानना चाह रहे हैं कि वो कंपोजिशन स्कीम में अगर आते हैं तो उनको एग्जेम्प्ट आइटम पर 1% का जीएसटी क्यों देना चाहिए, और आपने ऐसा प्रावधान क्यों किया?
एग्जेम्प्ट आइटम के ऊपर
मतलब जैसे टर्नओवर में आपने चूंकि एग्जेम्प्ट आइटम्स को भी शामिल किया है, तो इस पे क्यों?
इसलिए कि जब एग्जेम्प्ट और नॉन एग्जेम्प्ट का टर्नओवर होता है तो किसी भी व्यक्ति के लिए, टैक्स ऑफिसर के लिए ये तय करना मुश्किल हो जाता है कि उसका कितना टर्नओवर एग्जाम में गया, कितना नॉन एग्जाम में गया। सो अगर आप ऐसे व्यवसाय में हैं कि जहां एग्जाम सप्लाई बहुत ज़्यादा है तो फिर तो हमारी एडवाइस ये होगी कि आप रेगुलर रजिस्ट्रेशन में ही जाए, कंपोजिशन में मत जाए.
So as you can see that you also need to pay tax on the exempted supply. So the answer, the person who is giving the answer is the revenue secretary, is the revenue secretary of the revenue department. So as you can see that he said that you also need to pay tax on the exempted supply also, because he said because in case you are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme, it is difficult to identify that which good is exempted and which one is not exempted. So therefore you have to pay tax at the rate of 1%, 2% or 5% of the total turnover of the turnover in a state, and turnover in a state also include the exempted supply. So you need to pay tax on both taxable as well as exempted supply if you are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme. And he also said that if your turnover is the proportion of the turnover is greater of the exempted supply, then you can opt for the normal scheme or the normal provision. You don't need to opt for the composition scheme if your turnover is more of the exempted supply. So that what he said, and that what I am telling to you right now. So this is the case on the 8th July that you have to pay tax also on the exempted supply. So one or two people also asked me the same question after I made the video, that whether we need to pay tax on the exempted supply in case we are opting to pay tax in the composition scheme. So the answer is yes, you also need to pay tax on the composition on the exempted supply also. So suppose you are a shopkeeper and you also have the rice, in your shop. So because you know that the unbranded rice is exempted or nil rated, but because if you are opting to pay tax under the composition scheme, you also have to include that turnover of a rice also into your turnover in a state, and you also need to pay tax on those turnover. So that is the logical thinking and what the revenue secretary said in that class. So it means that yes, you have to pay the tax on the exempted supply, and that is not the drafting or clerical error. So that's why I just wanted to I just want to clarify you regarding the provision which I said in my earlier video, where I said that you don't need to pay tax on the exempted supply, but in actual the intention of lawmaker is that you should pay the tax on the exempted supply, because it is difficult to identify which one is exempted and which one is taxable. So therefore you need to pay tax under the composition scheme if you supply both taxable as well as exempted supply. Thank you.